3 separate Halloween nights in Los Angeles. 3 people who swore what happened was real. After this, you'll understand why. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight is about the night when masks mean nothing and the city forgets to pretend. 3 different people in Los Angeles walked into Halloween and met something that was not human. Each one thought it would be another noisy night of costumes and candy. Each one was wrong. If you clicked for real Halloween horrors from LA, you're in the right place. Keep your lights low. Remember the names. And if any of this sounds familiar, you might already be inside one of these stories. On the last Friday of October, a rideshare driver took the graveyard shift because the surge rates were good. He lived off Sunset and paid rent barely on time. He knew every shortcut in Echo Park and Silver Lake. He knew where drunk crowds spilled into the road and where cops waited in the dark. He kept the car clean, the dash camera on, and a mint tucked in his cheek to keep him awake. It was Halloween night. The air smelled like burned sugar and cheap fog machines. Confetti stuck to the floor mats. The city wore fake blood and plastic teeth. He picked up a last-minute ping near the lake. The map glowed soft blue. The pin floated somewhere along the water's edge, where the palms leaned over like tall watchers. He eased the car to the curb, switched on the hazards, and watched his rear view. The dashboard clock read 3:07 a.m. The lake was a flat, dark eye. A goose hissed once from the grass, then fell quiet. 3 minutes later, the rear door opened on its own. The sensor chimed. Cold air rolled into the car like the inside of a walk-in freezer. He turned his head and saw a passenger already seated and buckled. The costume was simple. A black hoodie, a white plastic mask with no mouth opening, and a strip of gray duct tape over the eye holes. The mask had no brand shine. It looked hand-sanded, dull like bone. The hoodie dripped as if it had been dipped in water. The smell was wet eucalyptus and mud. He asked the time out loud, even though the clock was right there. The clock ticked to 3:10 a.m. The map rerouted on its own to a destination he hadn't accepted, a cemetery in Boyle Heights he never picked because it made riders uneasy. The fare showed approved. His app said the rider's name was a blank space. His phone buzzed with a text that he didn't see for a second because he was already pulling away from the lake. The text relit the screen. It was from his own number. It said to keep driving. He told himself it was a prank. The city was full of them tonight. He took the glide of Sunset toward the east, past shuttered taco spots and a jack-o'-lantern sagging into itself on a curb. The car's heater fought the cold that came off the passenger like fog. He checked the rear view again. The white mask faced forward, steady with that matte look that felt not new and not old, only used. At the next red light, he reached for the dash cam to make sure it was recording. The camera's little red dot blinked once, then held steady. He felt better. He always trusted the recording more than his own sleep-starved eyes. The light turned green. He rolled through deserted intersections where paper cups spun in lazy circles. Somewhere in the hills, a siren cried, and then stopped like it had been told to hush. He glanced into the rear view out of habit. For a heartbeat, there were 2 white masks in the back seat, shoulder to shoulder. He blinked. There was only one. The cold rose along the hair on his arms. His palm on the wheel felt damp. He told himself it was condensation. The first odd thing had already happened, but he convinced himself it hadn't. It would not stay that easy. The GPS line thickened like a vein on the screen. He realized the route drew a shape he recognized only when he passed a closed floral shop with black bars. The path curved out of its way twice to form a rough loop like an eye, and then a straight line that cut through it. On the map, someone had drawn a needle piercing a white circle. He didn't like that. He asked another question to no one in the car. The clock still read 3:10 a.m. It had not moved in several blocks. The passenger's hoodie left a damp crescent on the seat. He could see the waterline in the rear view. It didn't soak deeper into the fabric. It just sat there, a cold memory. At the bridge over the river, he saw a smear of dark footprints along the concrete walkway at the guardrail. Big, small, bare feet with long second toes. He looked away fast and checked the rear passenger window. A face looked back from the glass. It was his own, but the reflection moved a little slower. It blinked after he blinked. Its mouth parted half a second after his did. This was not a trick of night glass. The lag made his stomach fold. A chorus floated up from under the bridge. It sounded like a school choir rehearsing with mouths closed. The hum swelled and thinned as he drove over the river. The mask in the back seat tilted toward the sound. The duct-taped eye holes turned as if they could see through the tape. The reflection lag and the humming under the bridge were the second and third steps down the ladder. He was on it now, and the rungs were slick. He pulled off the freeway and into Boyle Heights, where old Brick sat close to the street. The cemetery iron would have been shut at this hour, but when he rolled up, the bottom of the gate was not chained. The left door hung an inch open. There were wilted lilies tied to the bars with blue ribbon. He stopped at the curb and cleared his throat to ask the passenger to get out. He did not want to say words. He didn't want to hear how they would sound in the cold car with that mask. The rear door unlocked by itself. The car lights didn't come on. The mask lifted, turned, and faced him in the mirror a last time. The tapes over the eye holes had bubbled from damp, and now breathed in and out like slow lungs under the adhesive. The smell of eucalyptus filled his mouth like menthol. The rider left no footprint on the mat, but he saw water on the curb, a small clear pool with one dead gnat floating in it. The passenger was gone. The cemetery gate sighed against the iron. The app ended the trip and paid out. The clock changed to 3:11 a.m. The phone buzzed again, another text from his own number. It said to check the dash cam before he drove away. He played the clip. He watched himself drive across the bridge, eyes tight, jaw working. In the back seat, the mask sat still. Then the camera picked up movement where it shouldn't. At 3:10 a.m., the passenger split in two like a reflection stepping out of a mirror. One sat behind him. One slid its head sideways and touched the glass. The one at the window turned its taped eyes to the lens, with a love that felt like a hand pressed to a cheek. The tape darkened in two wet circles. The timestamp stuck on 3:10. He stopped the clip. He kept the car in park and wiped his palms on his jeans. The temperature had dropped enough to leave frost on the inside of the windshield. He dragged a sleeve across it and smeared a thin crescent. In that clear patch, he saw the black water of the lake with the palms leaning over the edge. He saw his car parked where it had been earlier. He saw himself sitting in it with his hands on the wheel. There was no one in his back seat in that view. Then the lake surface in the frost windshield rippled, and the mask surfaced like a face from below ice, white and patient, the tape blistering with breath. He jerked the car into drive and fled the curb. The bottom of the gate kissed the street behind him. He didn't take another trip that night. He went home, slept with the lights on, woke late, and went to the car to clean up. The back seat was dry. The eucalyptus smell had turned to something sour like old bandages. He replaced the cabin filter and thought it was over. A week later, He got a message from a different number with no name. It was a link to a video hosted on a site he didn't use. It was his dashcam clip, edited and slowed. The title said 310 Rider Boyle Heights. It had comments turned off. The view count climbed anyway. He tried to take it down and couldn't. People sent him screenshots. Some circled the second mask at the window. Some circled a third white shape on the opposite side that he hadn't seen. He froze the frame and saw it too. Pressed to the glass on the driver's side, a narrow blur low to the door, like a child's mask peeking up from the seat seam. Every Halloween since, his clock pauses at 3:10 a.m. on any ride near the river. The app asks him to pick up a rider at the lake. He doesn't accept. The text still comes from his own number. It still says to keep driving. He deletes it each year. The smell of wet eucalyptus still finds him in traffic on warm days. When he looks into the side mirror in a certain light, his own reflection blinks late by half a breath. You can delete a file. You can't delete the time it marked. In this city, some minutes do not end. On a different Halloween, a prop house in Boyle Heights stayed open late to meet the rush. The building was a brick oven in summer and a cold cellar in fall. It sat under a tangle of power lines that sang when the air was damp. Inside, the aisles were stacked with costumes and masks from 100 commercials and student films and low-budget horrors. Heavier pieces hung on rolling racks. Fursuits missing tails, soldier uniforms stained with stage blood, angel wings with the feathers shot through with glitter. The woman who managed the place liked order. She tagged everything with a code. Her clipboard was her lantern. A new delivery had come in from a shuttered production in the valley. Boxes of mirrored set dressing and one large mirror wrapped in moving blankets and blue tape. The mirror had a frame painted to look like aged bronze with ivy leaves. When she peeled the wrap back, it smelled like a wet basement and varnish. The glass had a faint cloudiness, as if smoke had kissed it and left. She set it against an end cap as a sales trick. People liked to see themselves in costumes. She noticed at once that the mirror was not a clean reflection. It lagged just a little. A hand raised, and the mirror hand followed a beat later. It could just be the light. The fluorescents over aisle 7 were fussy. She made a note to replace the ballast. Customers loved the mirror. They laughed at its old-world look and its weight. They posed in cheap plastic armor and glitter horns. They walked away and asked if the mirror was for sale. She said no. She wanted to keep it through the season. The mirror made people linger, and linger meant rentals. Around midnight, her staff left to catch a horror marathon downtown. She stayed to close. The neighborhood was quiet in that held breath way that comes when the city plans to explode with noise later. It would be loud again in an hour. For now, the sound was a soda machine cycling on and a small fan humming behind the desk. The mirror looked black from across the room. She counted the till and put it into a bank bag with a strip of masking tape for a label. She heard fabric whisper behind her. Not the fan. Not the soda machine. A slow brush like a skirt on concrete. She turned. A long gown swayed on a hanger in no air. She set her jaw and walked the aisle. The gown stilled. She touched it. The fabric was soft and cold, as if it had just been pulled from a trunk in a damp garage. She hung it back straight and went for the switch for the overheads. Before she reached it, a costume mask clacked onto the floor behind her. It was a plastic half-face with a cracked cheek and a smear of blush. It spun and stopped with its painted eye looking at her shoe. She put it back, careful, like it was a glass she might chip. She told herself the rack was crowded and something slipped. The mirror lag was a toy until it wasn't. The store had been quiet. Now it was listening. She checked the mirror again while walking past it. Her reflection stood 2 inches too far left. It adjusted to match her only when she stopped moving. When it caught up, it showed her with the wrong bank bag. The tape on the bag and the glass was blue. In her hand it was white. She held her breath and watched the glass. The reflection looked tired. Fight always did this time of year. It rubbed its thumb against the bank bag and left a dark smear that she didn't see on her own bag. Her eyes stung. She told herself she needed sleep. She tried to power down the floor lights. The switch clicked. The fluorescence dimmed and then came half back. A few bulbs buzzed and flickered. The mirror brightened as if lit from behind. The surface deepened, going from glass to water. She could smell fresh paint, damp wood, and a sweet, heavy perfume like old roses. The frame's ivy leaves looked softer than they had a minute ago, as if they were fresh vines dipped in bronze. A figure moved in the glass. It was not her. It wore layers of fabric stitched together. A sleeve of black lace, an arm in red flannel, a shoulder in sequins, a collar of grey wool. The thing's head was wrapped in gauze that might have been bandages, or might have been wedding veil. The eyes were open holes in the wrap, dark and wide. It stood just behind her reflection, patient. When she turned around in the real aisle, nothing stood there. When she looked back at the mirror, the layered figure put its hand to the inside of the glass. She noted a rule right then, without meaning to. The mirror showed truths a few seconds late. It also showed what stood in the same air when nothing was there to see. If the thing touched the glass, she could feel the cold in her bones. If she touched the glass, the thing could step forward. She didn't want that. She backed away. Rules always arrive late and feel like they've always been there. She had one now, and the mirror liked that. The phone at the desk buzzed. A text from her part-time clerk asked if she had seen the viral clip of a rideshare mask. She swiped it away without opening. The mirror figure moved again. It leaned its wrapped head to the side like a curious child. A little paper tag fluttered under its chin in the glass. The tag said Lot 217. She checked her clipboard. Lot 217 was the mirror itself. The mirror whispered without sound. The whisper was fabric stroke and hanger rattle, and the faint snip of scissors far away. Costumes along the aisle closest to the glass began to sway one by one. Not with a moving fan, with breath. Dresses lifted like lungs. A feather boa rose and fell like a sleeping thing. She had to get the mirror out. She found the blue tape used to move it and ran a strip across the glass, just like the shipping wrap had once done. The tape went cloudy. Her fingers tingled numb. The layered figure inside stepped closer until its gauze-wrapped forehead pressed the tape. Moisture spread under the adhesive like sweat. She added more tape like crosses, like bars. The figure pressed with both hands, and then set its head against the X and stayed there as if that posture was old to it, as if this was the only way it slept. The store lights went out for real now. The space sank into that grey that makes edges fat and soft. The mirror held its own glow. She felt the cold come out over the tile. Her breath condensed and fell in little pearls on the glass countertop and popped. She picked up the bank bag and knew she would leave by the front door and set the alarm with shaking thumbs and not come back until daylight, with 2 co-workers, with every bulb on. She didn't reach the door. The racks on either side leaned in like trees in wind. Fabric brushed her cheeks and arms, clean, then dusty, then damp. The smell of old perfume thickened. The humming started behind her left ear, as if someone with thread in their mouth stood too close. The mirror showed her again, and now her reflection had a stripe of gauze tied at the throat. She touched her neck. Nothing there. The glass was a liar when it wanted to be. The rolling rack beside the mirror moved an inch. Then, too, it squealed a wheel. The mirror shifted, tilting forward as if to bow. She jumped to steady it without thinking and slapped her palm flat to the glass. The cold took her to the wrist. The layered figure met her hand from the other side like a partner accepting a dance. The gauze unfurled from its head by itself. It became a strip that reached for her, slow and gentle, and wrapped her hand and then her wrist. She tried to pull back, but the gauze had her. It was soft, warm, and unkind. It left a print on her skin like dust. The Tapex hissed as if steam leaked. The mirror felt like a living mouth pressed flat. She yanked free with a sound she hated and fell on her hip. The mirror tilted but did not fall. The layered figure put its hand to the glass again, palm first, and let the gauze slide from it like a goodbye. The ivy frame seemed to pulse like a frog's throat. The light over aisle 7 flicked back on with a bang and stayed steady. The mirror went dull. She left the store and locked it, alarm shrieking until the code took. She sat in her car with the bank bag on the passenger seat and her hand on the wheel shaking. The inside of her wrist had a grey smear in the perfect shape of fingers that did not match her own. She scrubbed it with a wet wipe until the skin went raw. The print stayed. It faded by morning into a bruise shaped like ivy leaves. She sold the mirror the next day for cash and no receipt. A young couple in costume took it away in a pickup. They said it would be fun for a party. She told them to keep the tape on the glass until Halloween passed. They laughed kindly. They peeled the tape off as they loaded it, as if the mirror needed to breathe. They never came back. A week later, a video circulated of an apartment in Highland Park where a room full of costumes swayed with no music. The mirror leaned against a wall with wreaths of green tape on the surface, like fingerprints you couldn't wipe away. Someone commented that they saw a woman press her hand to the glass and a thing inside press back. The sound on the clip was low, like thread pulled through cloth. The comment had 2 likes and then vanished. People love mirrors until they learn what the mirror loves. On a third Halloween, a low-rise building in Culver City hosted a small AM station with a signal that barely reached downtown on a clear night. A man who had made himself into a night voice ran the midnight hour. He sat in a room where the carpet smelled like coffee and old books. The board hummed. The on-air sign glowed. Most callers were lonely. Some were drunk. A few were mean. He had learned to steer and smile and pretend he wasn't alone in the room when the hall light turned itself off at 12:01 a.m. most nights. He had a routine for Halloween. He took calls about haunted houses and strange sounds and last-minute costume disasters. He kept it light because the sponsors liked it that way. But each Halloween after he took the job, one call slipped in that was not light. It never came from a number he could see. The caller ID said private. The time always stamped 12:01 a.m. The voice always said his name backward first, then forward, like someone teaching a child a trick. There was always a thump in the line, like a hand on wood a room away. He never said the voice's name on air because it never offered one. He never told the audience how the room's temperature dropped when that call came in. The board's meters bled blue and stayed there. The tubes behind the rack glowed brighter. Frost bloomed on the metal edges of his desk, like an old photo developing in reverse. He picked up the line again this Halloween because that was his job, and also because he could not pick it up. The first thing he heard was the backward version of his name. It slid over his ear like ice water poured slow. The second thing he heard was a far-off radio, his own delayed by a breath. The third thing was a second voice behind the first, quiet, repeating everything with a child's exactness. The room light in the hallway clicked off. The on-air sign steadied, red like a stop wound. If you've ever heard your name wrong on purpose, you know how a thing can lay claim. He knew it now, late and too well. He tried to keep the show moving. He stacked tracks and rolled a bed of soft music under his words. The board's faders pushed themselves up a hair like someone was bored and needed a fidget. At 12:03 a.m., the tower outside clicked in the wind with that specific dry metal sound that carries through glass. At 12:04, a pop came from inside the wall, as if something exploded far away, and the shock wave took 5 seconds to arrive. He had a rule he'd learned by accident. If he spoke his own name on air while that voice was on the line, the recording would cut. The show archive would skip a clean 2 minutes. If he refused to say his name, the archive would hold. The night staff who processed podcasts had joked once that a ghost didn't like self-promo. He had not laughed. He had watched 4 hard drives fail in the studio the year that rule revealed itself. He had learned a second rule, too. If he answered any question asked by the backward voice in fewer than 3 words, the lights would pop and leave him in the dark until 12:10. He didn't test that rule anymore. Tonight the voice asked for a list of names. It did it slow. It wanted the first caller. It wanted the third. It wanted the 7th. The numbers were always odd, like the steps of a staircase that refused to land even. The second voice, the child, echoed each number. He could smell hot dust from the board now, the sign of a fuse that considered its options. He added more bed music. He cranked the room's thermostat. The air stayed cold enough to hang a breath. Listeners texted the station line that their radios were picking up a second show under his. A faint numbers station, a woman counting in halting English, someone else tapping in 3s against a microphone. 3 taps, a pause, 3 taps, a pause. Tap, tap, tap. He heard it too now when he took his headphones off one ear. It came from the direction of the tower, but the tower was old and honest and had never done this. Los Angeles forgets its old signals, but they never forget us. They circle the basin like coyotes at the scent of trash and little dogs. He walked to the window while a song played. He kept one hand on the fader out of habit, the way a rider keeps one hand on a rail. The parking lot was empty, but for a single sedan under a broken light and the smear of the city's glow behind the oil field. Pump jacks nodded slow on the hill like tired horses. The tower stood black against the deeper black of cloud. He watched its tip vanish in the grey. When he came back to the board, something had changed on his screen. The archive folder had created a new subfolder by itself. The name of the folder was his own name backward. Inside it, 3 files sat with timestamps for the last 3 Halloweens. He had not created those. He had not saved those. He opened the oldest and heard his own voice, then the backward voice, then a third voice that might have been him answering a question he swore he had not answered. He closed the file and didn't open the other 2. He moved the mouse to delete them. The cursor locked. The files duplicated and then duplicated again. His headphones gave him a whisper of cloth against cloth with no one in the room moving. At 12:07 a.m., an old photo fell from the wall. It was a black and white of the station as a newsroom in the 1950s. The faces in the picture had that stiff look of people who knew a camera was a rare thing. On the floor, the glass cracked in a line that ran right across one woman's mouth so that it looked taped shut. He felt a sudden pressure in his jaw, a clamp, then the release. The meters on the board all pegged right for a second, and then fell as if they had been thrown and then caught. The voice on the line asked for the 11th name. He did not say any name. He said a street. He said another song title. He said the word static. The backward voice repeated each like it was learning to speak. The hallway door clicked. He expected the night security guard. The station had one who walked the loop every hour and signed a log. The guard did not appear. The door closed itself very quietly, like someone had placed a palm on it to help it latch. He could see his breath now without looking for it. He reached for the coffee and found it iced in the cup. The top had a thin skin like a puddle on a winter morning. He pressed his finger through it and felt the sting. The show had always been about voices. Tonight it wanted bodies. It wanted to prove voices were enough to fetch them. At 12:09, the station switched to emergency generator for no good reason. The board stayed lit. The server rack stayed warm. The rest of the building dimmed to a coal. He kept talking because that was the only answer he had left. He filled the air with fat words and slow vowels. He told a story about a man who walked home one night and saw two masks in his back seat. He didn't say the city. He didn't say the time. He said the smell of eucalyptus because it made sense to him in a way he didn't like. The numbers station under his show counted down from 3, 3, 2, 1. The backward voice stopped. The child voice said his real name once, not backward, clear as a bell. The tower outside made a dry cracking sound like a knuckle. The light in the hallway flicked on. The temperature lifted a hair, enough to make his breath shorten. He reached for the dump button without looking and felt nothing under his finger. The dump button was gone. The panel showed a smooth surface where the button had been a second earlier. He looked down. The button lay on the mat by his elbow like a tooth. The call cut. The archive light blinked. His screen showed a new file in the backward name folder. It had tonight's date and the time 12:01 to 12:10. He did not open it. He closed the folder, finished the hour, played a last track, and sat with his hands on the desk, as if it were a table in church. He took the file home on a thumb drive because he couldn't not. He listened once more with headphones that he trusted in a living room that knew his habits. The file played the show, then the layered voices, then another sound that made the hair lift on his arms. It was the sound of something breathing through cloth. The breath paused exactly every 3 beats. It matched the pump jacks on the hill. The file ended with the faintest tap on wood. He counted out loud along with it and knew that the count wasn't 3. It was 11. He didn't own 11 of anything you could knock, so the sound had not come from his room. He doesn't work at the station anymore. He left without a scene. Another voice took his hour. On Halloween, he still wakes at 12:01 a.m., with the room too cold and the house too quiet. The hallway nightlight clicks off. The ice maker in his fridge holds its breath. His phone shows a missed call from private and a voicemail that plays his name backward once and a whisper of cloth. He changed numbers twice. It doesn't matter. The tower is not the tower. The thing that used to use it learned to use him and can reach a person by their breath. Some stations go off the air. Some do not. They go under the air and wait for the one night your name is easy to say wrong. Los Angeles treats Halloween like a show, but the city knows the old ways under the makeup. Ryder leaves a cemetery gate half closed, and a clock holds a minute that does not pass. A mirror arrives with tape across its mouth, and the tape isn't enough. A late-night voice thinks he controls the board, and the button comes off in his hand like a loose tooth. If anything here felt too close to your own night, treat that as a rule you didn't know you were obeying. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And if you made it to the end, hit like, subscribe to the Black Hour Stories, and keep the lights low on Halloween. The city doesn't care if you believe. It only cares that you keep driving, keep looking, and keep answering to your name.